Welcome to the Nature Photo Guys podcast,
where we talk about nature photography, from gear to our philosophies and everything in between.
So grab a cup of coffee, sit back and relax.
You're listening to Joe Desjardins
and Chris Gibbs, the Nature Photo Guys.
Hey Chris, how are we doing this week?
Good, how you doing, Joe?
Oh, freaking hot.
It is very hot. Calgary has been exceptionally hot, 35 degrees at times.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not a guy for the heat. I'm always trying to stay in the shade, hibernate, whatever, right? So
totally, yeah. No, I agree. If it was like 23 at all times, I'd be fine with that. It's 35 is too hot. So
I hear you. So
yeah. Have you been out shooting lately?
Actually, I went out on the weekend with my mom. She's in from Ontario. So it was actually a pretty good morning. We got to see a grizzly bear feeding on some buffalo berries.
Really? Good for you.
Yeah. And she also got to shoot some pikas, ground squirrels, some bighorn sheep.
Nice.
So she was pretty happy, pretty stoked about it. So
absolutely.
I actually got her some prints made up. So
good.
For her to take back home. So she's pretty excited to get those up on the wall. So that's cool.
Very good. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. She'd be excited to see all the animals for sure, especially the pikas. They're funny little characters.
Yeah, they're so cute, right? She just loves them. So
yeah.
What about you?
I haven't done too much landscape and nature stuff lately. I've been doing some hockey shoots in an arena, but I haven't really been. I got to get out soon here again. I've just been super busy, unfortunately. So
well, I mean, fall's coming, right? Next month, the elk will start, slowly getting into the rut and that sort of thing, right?
Sure.
So
yeah.
I've seen photos already that they're dropping their velvet and stuff like that. So it's getting close. So.
Yeah.
And temperatures will be a little bit on the cooler side too. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be nice. So
for us and the animals.
Yeah, exactly. So this week we're going to talk about ISO, right?
Yes, we are. Yep.
The third part of the exposure triangle, aperture, shutter, and ISO, and how they all kind of work together. So this is kind of like the third part of it, right? The final piece.
Yeah, bring it all together, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what is ISO, right?
Exactly.
ISO is the sensor's sensitivity to light, right?
Right. Yep.
If you're an old-time film shooter, back in the day, it's kind of the same thing, film speed, right? We had ratings of like 100, 200, 400, 800, and the same works for ISO with digital cameras. So, the way it works is the lower the number, the less sensitive the sensor is to light. So ISO 100 is usually the lowest most cameras will go, right? Mm-hmm. And as you increase the 200, 400, 800, 1600, the camera becomes more sensitive to light. Okay. So, I mean, that's just kind of a generalization of what ISO is. Right?
Yes. Oh, for sure. Yeah. There's a lot involved in it for sure.
Oh, that's right. But I mean, just to give everybody a general idea of what it is. Now, the other part of ISO is graininess to the image, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. So when you use a low ISO like 100, you're pretty much going to get the tightest grain possible. Okay. So again, back in the film days, when you use 400 or 800, things look really grainy. Well, the same thing works for digital cameras, right? So, what I try to do is shoot with the tightest ISO possible. So the lowest ISO possible based on the light, right? And a lot of times you just can't shoot at 100 or 200 because, as nature photographers, when is the prime time to shoot?
Yeah, right? When there's not much light.
Exactly. Early morning, late evening, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times we're pushing the ISO. So what we're trying to do is find a good balance, right? High enough ISO that we can get just a fast enough shutter speed to freeze the action without getting a blurry image, right?
That's right. Yes. Unless you want a blurry image. I mean, I guess that's a different story. But in this
Well,
case,
yeah, I mean, unless you're getting creative and you're
yeah,
panning, you're trying to show
trying to show
motion, but
speed. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
exactly. But in general, you're trying to get a nice sharp image, right? Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
So to put this into perspective, back in episode 4, okay, we're talking about aperture priority and kind of promoting it as the best way to shoot, right?
Yeah. Our opinion
Our
anyway,
opinion,
right?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So in this case here, um, according to the times we shoot, right? Early morning, late evening.
Yep.
We're usually shooting at a wide open aperture.
That's right.
f4 5.6. Well, this is where ISO comes in. So when we have a fixed aperture, ISO really is the only component that we have to adjust, right? Because that's going to determine the shutter speed,
Correct.
right? ISO is
Yes.
going to determine the shutter speed based on the amount of light we have. So what we're going to do is, let's say we started at 400 ISO. Sun's just coming up, and there's some light coming in, and we're shooting at 5.6 for an aperture, ISO 400, but our shutter speed's down to 1/15 of a second.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we know right off the bat, that's just going to be too slow to photograph pretty much anything, especially if you're hand holding.
Yeah,
right?
I was gonna say, if you're on a tripod, maybe different scenario, but if you're hand holding, forget it.
Exactly. And with wildlife, as much as they look like they're frozen sometimes, or they're motionless, they're going to move, and they'll probably move at the time where you're just going to trip the shutter or something, and you're going to get a blurry image.
It always
right?
happens, right? Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is where you got to start playing with the ISO, right? And this is why I advocate too that knowing where your ISO button is, so you don't have to take your eye away from the viewfinder, and adjusting it to get a fast enough shutter speed. So where my ISO button is, right at the top of the camera, I just use my index finger to, press down and then turn the dial, and I can ratchet up and down whatever ISO I think is needed to get, a fast enough shutter speed. So I'm actually watching the shutter speed change inside the viewfinder, right?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
So sometimes, if I want to get to about, let's say, 1/60th of a second or 1/25th of a second, something like that. Sometimes, depending on light, I have to go up to, say, 1600 ISO. You know what I mean? Sometimes I'm pushing 2000, and, depending on the camera, that's starting to get a little on the grainy side.
It is for sure. Yes. On full frame cameras, I think it's in my experience, it seems to do a little better, but
that's right.
But and you get what you pay for, I guess, as well. You know what I mean? So the more expensive cameras, I think you can go a lot higher on the ISO from what I've found.
And yeah, absolutely. Like I found that too with the full frames, a lot tighter ISO at the higher, or a lot tighter grain at the higher ISOs, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, I've actually on the Canon 1DX Mark II, I've in the past, I've shot in as high as 10,000 ISO,
Wow.
Based on, well, it was 10:30 in the evening, light was pretty much non-existent, and I had a wolf come into my frame, right? You know what I mean? So it was the ISO that I needed to get a fast enough shutter speed to freeze the action, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
And it still turned out not bad, with a little bit of post-processing, everything kind of tightened up a little bit, right?
Oh, that's great.
But then, you go to the Micro Four Thirds, the mirrorless, which are, these ones are about half the size of a full frame. You can't push it that high. In my experience, you just can't. But, you could still get decent imagery at, 1600, 2000, sometimes 3200 ISO.
Sure.
Which is lots. I mean, that's, 5 years ago, you wouldn't even consider shooting, at that high ISO with anything. Right?
No. Oh, no, for sure.
But now, being able to push it with the Micro Four Thirds, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Oh, for sure.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we're at as far as the third component of the exposure triangle, right?
Yes.
And if everybody can kind of get their head wrapped around that The only thing you have to adjust is the ISO, when you're shooting an aperture priority. It makes things really simple, right?
Right. Yep.
And that's it. I mean, it's as simple as that. Um, Now, that's shooting wildlife, right? That's maybe hand holding, shooting off a rest, that sort of thing, right?
Yes. Yep.
Now we're talking about high ISOs, but what about shooting sunrise, sunset images,
Sure.
right?
Well, you're not going to be hand holding probably.
Exactly. So you're on a tripod, right?
Yes.
So in this case here, this is where you can get that nice tight grain, that nice sharp image using the lowest ISO that you can use, which on most cameras is about 100, right?
That's right. Yeah.
I know your Fuji said was what,
Yeah,
200?
the Fuji's are 200. My 5D Mark III, actually, I can set it to 50.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
you can too on the 1DX Mark II.
Yeah,
Goes to 50.
exactly. Yeah, you betcha.
But as long as you can get to 100, 200, I think that's pretty livable, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's crazy good at that ISO.
Yeah.
And then again, this case here, we're not really even worried about the shutter speed, are we?
Oh,
You
no.
know what I mean? Like if we're at ISO 50 or 100 and our shutter speed is a second, it's really irrelevant, to get a good basic exposure. Now, there's a lot of guys that like to do the like long exposure, 30-second exposure, 2 minute. And I'm guilty of that. I like doing the long exposure stuff. Yeah, exactly. So in that case there, sometimes you're pushing it even further with using ND filters, et cetera. But you're still using that low ISO.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
where shutter speed doesn't matter, then 100 it is, right? Or whatever it is on your camera. So
sometimes shutter speed does matter if it's windy. Sometimes you don't want foreground movement depending on what you're looking at, but most of the time in the golden hour we're concentrating on the light. Correct?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. I mean, for the most part, a little bit of movement in grass, let's say, or the trees or whatever like that, isn't really relevant. But again, if you want to freeze that, if there's a slight breeze, then you're going to have to sacrifice a bit of grain, right? Now you're going to have to adjust the ISO higher to get a faster shutter speed to freeze that, right?
Exactly.
And I find in landscape photography, anyways, for that kind of stuff, a little bit of movement's fine. It kind of adds to the image too, right? So
yeah, and you can see it, and it adds creativity as well, right? Especially with the clouds moving and the grass moving,
for sure.
That adds to it.
For sure. Now, one other thing I wanted to bring up about the ISO is you have to determine yourself as a photographer what's acceptable to you. Okay.
Correct.
So, certain cameras, let's say I picked up, whatever camera, you gave me what you borrowed, or you lent me a camera to use. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
And I've never used it before. Well, probably one of the first things I'm going to do is take images at 100, 200, 400, and I'll push it up to whatever I think is adequate, 3,200,
right.
say even 6,400.
Right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And then I'll take a look at those images, and I'll decide, well, geez, maybe 1,600 is going to be the max, on this camera here, because it really starts to fall apart after. Or maybe, wow, I'd be happy shooting at 3,200 all day long. You know what I mean?
Yes.
For wildlife photography, right? Because I've always said this, for feathers and fur, you know what I mean? A little grain doesn't hurt.
Sure.
Right? You know what I mean? It's true.
Fair enough.
And that's why I print a lot of that stuff. What's that?
That's a good comment. I like that.
Well, that's why I advocate printing on canvases too, right? Wildlife.
Yeah.
Feathers and fur. Yeah, and the canvases give it that kind of that painterly look and
texture.
And grain texture, exactly. And grain's okay, right?
For sure it is.
So
yes.
it depends on the medium you're using too, right? So So I guess just knowing your camera, what you're comfortable with, and what you're going to do with the images too. So I guess maybe that's a good point. I'm just mentioning there is, I know for the most part, any wildlife image is probably going to be printed on a canvas. Like, don't get me wrong. I've printed stuff on metal, on luster paper, that sort of thing.
Yeah, me too.
But if stuff is maybe a little bit on the grainier side, then it'd be perfect for a canvas print.
Sure. Yeah. I've even on the paper side of it, I'm now printing on textured paper, right? So if I didn't want to get the canvas, I'm doing it on the textured paper, and the same concept, right?
That's right. So, it's not like you're cheating,
No.
but you know, you can, it's just another part of the creative process, right? You
Sure.
know,
Yeah,
so,
I
so it's
agree.
all good. Yeah,
And
you
one thing
bet.
I was going to say with testing ISO levels,
Hmm.
at the end of the day, if you're grabbing a camera and you've just got it, yes, you can test it out in the field, but you should probably bring it back to your computer and look it out on the computer, because some of these little LCD screens, it may look okay, but there's probably more grain than looking in this 2-inch screen, that you should probably look in a little bit closer on your computer on your bigger screen.
Oh, 100%. And I should have mentioned that. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely viewed on the computer.
Yeah.
Almost anything I do isn't, how do I say that? It isn't, I take it with a grain of salt, whatever I see on the back of the LCD,
Right.
especially exposure. You know what I mean? If you're wondering if the exposure, if you nailed the exposure and you're not sure looking at the LCD, best look at the histogram, right?
Oh,
So,
yeah. And most of the time on a bright sunny day,
yeah,
you have to go by the histogram.
that's right. It's pretty near impossible to tell looking at the back,
Oh,
anyways.
totally. Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's a good point there, Chris. You know, looking at the ISO on your computer,
Yeah.
right?
People call that what, pixel peeping or whatever, right? So
Exactly. But it's important, you know what I
it
mean?
is.
Because you know, you and I, we do produce large prints,
We
right?
do.
You
Yeah.
know, and for the most part, you know, these 20 by 30s need to be, you know, adequately sharp, right? You know, the tighter the grain, the better. Again, right? You know, so
You have to. Yeah. You
yeah,
have to.
you betcha. And you know, if you do shoot something a little bit on the higher side, just remember, depending on your post processing skills, you know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of great programs out there that can actually tighten up the grain.
And you know what? They're just getting better and better, and some of them are even have a AI built into them, and they
That's right.
anticipate what the image should look like and correct it for you. Like, it's getting crazy out there.
Well, I mean, I don't use anything specific other than Lightroom and Photoshop,
Yeah.
but Topaz,
Topaz. That's exactly what I was thinking of.
AI, yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen some of the stuff, and I'm actually considering it.
Yeah, I've looked at it
Um,
over and over. It's there's a bunch of packages there too, and even on the video side, I do tons of video,
yeah.
and it's up converting it from HD or from SD to 4K.
Mm-hmm.
Even AI recognizes what's missing and fixes it for you. So
Wow.
yeah, things are getting a little crazy out there. And I guess at the end of the day, it's not, people can call it cheating as well. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to hear that, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know too many photographers that don't post process images these days.
Oh no, you have to. So
You know what I mean?
like that's a good point, because I mean, any raw image, like if you're shooting raw, any raw image coming out of any camera needs to be sharpened for one,
Yes.
right off the bat. So there you go. You're already starting to do post processing,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And it's kind of one of the first things I do as far as when images coming out is sharpen and adjust the ISO, like the grain, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like adjust the luminance noise, right? You
Yeah.
know, yeah, I mean, it's not cheating. It's just the way of life now as a digital photographer.
Yeah, and
You know?
to me, like all my landscape shots,
Mhm.
sometimes I bring the highlights down, bring some shadows up, play with it,
Mhm.
because I like to bring the image back to the way I envision it while I was standing there in that morning. Because
That's
the
right.
camera can't always produce exactly what you can see, and vice versa. So you're imagining this image and you're trying to make a creation. It's no different
Mhm.
than a painter trying to paint, right?
Mhm.
So you're creating something.
Yeah, you bet. And I mean, I know we're kind of getting a
We
little
are
off
off track
topic
a little
here,
bit there, but
but
yeah.
I mean, that's what happens, right? You start talking
Yeah.
shop and boom, you know, you're just like one thing leads to another, right? You know?
Yeah, totally.
But the point, yeah, there was one point I wanted to make here was so realistically, if you think about it, you don't have to buy those $8,000 cameras anymore because the software is getting so good, right?
Yes, it
That
sure
you
is.
know you can pick up an inexpensive camera that you know you may only be comfortable shooting at 800 or 1600 ISO, but the software brings it back in to the point where it's nice and tight and it looks like you shot it at 100 or 200.
Yeah. Yeah.
So keep that
Times
in
have
mind
changed.
too.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Times have changed.
Well, and that's it, you know. So,
Yeah.
especially shooting micro four thirds,
Yeah.
half of a full frame, and you know what I mean. The stuff I'm shooting at 1600 or 3200. You know, with a little bit of post processing, man, it looks tight. You know,
Sure.
as far
Yeah.
as the grain goes, right? So you got to keep that in mind too.
Yeah, you got a great point there. Instead of spending, maybe $7,000 on the brand new Canon R5,
Yeah.
maybe look at post processing and maybe you can create this or something close to it anyway,
Close.
right?
Exactly. I mean, nothing is going to really replace, shooting something like full frame, tight
Yeah.
ISO. Like, you know the point I'm
Yes,
trying to make
I
is
know
just
exactly what you're
you,
talking
you
about.
you can you can certainly help images being shot with consumer cameras, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Or prosumer cameras, or
Sure.
that kind of stuff, right? So
Yeah. Even iPhones, right? So I mean,
yeah, exactly. Oh, I don't even want to go there. I
I
mean,
know
some of the stuff I've shot with my iPhone were just, it's insane,
it
absolutely
sure is.
insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
But not wildlife, but landscape
No,
stuff.
it doesn't have a zoom lens.
No, that's
Well,
right.
it does, but it's not like the zoom lens you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. But
Oh man.
yeah, so I mean, I don't know if is there anything else, Chris, that
No,
you want to touch on?
I was gonna say, I know that this is a landscape and nature discussion, but at the end of the day, I did shoot in an arena last week, and I
Oh yeah.
was constantly adjusting my ISO, trying to get a balance between shutter speed. I wanted to be f2.8, on the aperture, but I wanted to freeze the puck in motion, that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of me playing with ISO, and then boosting it, seeing how far I could go. I was at the scenario, I didn't have a computer to access, so I was anticipating where I could be. And, I found, ISO 2000 was livable.
Okay.
I actually tried my Fuji cameras and my Canon cameras, and I was impressed with the Fuji cameras. I was quite surprised that I could, at ISO 2000, get a really good image, where maybe on the Canon I would have been at ISO potentially 4000. I've got to look at those images and figure that out. But it seemed the Fuji cameras seemed to handle it better. So
Okay, so which bodies are you talking about? Just so we're not comparing, a certain Fuji with
yeah. So
Canon.
I use the Fuji X-T4. That's the new
Yeah.
Fuji X series camera. Just came out in May. It's got image stabilization where the previous one didn't. So that's
Okay.
the new one. However, it does have the same sensor as the Fuji X-T3. So that's the quality I'm talking about. When compared to what I was using was my 7D Mark II and the 5D Mark III.
Okay.
Crop sensor and full
So
frame.
older camera bodies, yeah.
They're older camera bodies. They're not new. No, I don't have a 1DX Mark II or anything like that, or 3. But I was pretty happy with that. But yeah, no, I was constantly playing with the ISO, trying to figure out the balance that you're talking about, and the fact that I don't want grainy images for it was a goaltender camp, right? So I don't want grainy images on the goaltenders. But I want the image frozen as well, right? So I was constantly battling back and forth to find the right scenario. Much
There's
like
going
in
to be a
wildlife.
compromise. There's going to be a compromise,
Totally.
right?
Yes. And what you, like you said, it was up to me as the photographer to determine what that compromise was. Right. So, and I did.
So in this case here, now, right?
I
Remember
know
we were
now.
saying that you have to kind of make, test the camera, kind of decide where you're going to be comfortable. Now it sounds to me like you're really comfortable with the Fuji at ISO 2000.
Yeah, no, I was really comfortable. And, if anybody listened to the last episode, I did get that new Fringer adapter. So I did have the adapter on there with my Canon lens on the Fuji camera. Autofocus, everything was great. 15 frames per second, it handled really good. So I was very impressed. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Since it is a new camera, I didn't really get a chance to play around with it as much as I probably should have before I left. But,
I hear you.
But, busy times, leads to anticipating and trying on the fly. But I'm happy with that. But you're right in the fact it's kind of the same in wildlife. When the sun's going down, you're constantly adjusting that ISO as the light's leaving.
So again, perfect example. Early morning, late evening. Yourself, boom, I can push it to 2000. Be happy with the images.
I think
right?
so.
If you needed to, right?
If I needed to, yeah.
So there's that comfort level knowing that now.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, not necessarily shooting, being out and shooting nature photography, all kinds of shooting. Like another case in point, my daughter's an equestrian
Yes.
rider, right?
Yep.
And, back in the day when she used to compete heavily, we had to shoot inside arenas, right?
Sure.
Inside of barns, right? Okay.
Yes.
So I found that, back then, I mean, a lot of times these arenas weren't lit all that
No,
well, right?
they never are.
So now you're shooting at sometimes 3200 ISO or more, right? Just to get a shutter speed of about 1/125th of a second, 1/250th of a second, to freeze the horse and rider going over the jumps, right?
Yes, that's key in equestrian.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of it was timing. There's almost like that slight hesitation when they're going over the fence where they're kind of frozen in time for that split second.
Yeah.
But it was a matter of getting a sharp image with a little bit of grain or not getting the image at all.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
So you got to think about that too with wildlife photography. I'd rather have a slightly grainy picture of a bear or no picture at all.
That's right. Yeah,
right.
I agree.
So,
and as we just talked about, software these days could fix that, right? So you just get the image.
That's right. Get the shot. And who knows, there's a lot of images that were on the grainy side that I never deleted off the computer because I'm thinking ahead. I'm thinking, well, what's the software going to be like in 5 years?
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
From now.
You're right.
From now. Yeah. Something with maybe even a slight blur. Or, something that's a little on the grainy side, a little too much that I couldn't help. Think about what maybe 5 years from now, especially that killer shot that you got. And it's like, oh, damn, it's just a little too grainy. I just can't tighten it up enough.
Totally.
Think about, what's going to happen in 5 years from now where, you drop that image into the software and boom, comes out razor sharp or something.
Because you may get a once in a lifetime shot
and
get home and it's blurry and then you delete it. But don't, just in case, is what you're saying, right?
And I'm talking so close that I can tell, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I
but
know.
It's not that,
shots,
it may not be that bad for, say, social media, but I'd never print it, right?
No,
you know what I mean?
And some people that you look at, some people may look at it and not notice what you notice either, right?
Because that's right. But I think the software is going to get to the point where it could probably save a lot of these images.
I think you're right. I agree. Especially Topaz, like you said, they seem to be on this AI technology and they're kind of ahead of the curve, I think. So you're right. We'll have to investigate and look into that one day.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really considering it. I mean, it's for the price. I mean, I don't know. I think it's under $100 just for the Topaz Noise AI one.
Right. Yep.
I think it's probably more like $60 or $70 US or something like that.
Yeah, and they have a bunch of packages as well too. So I mean, but at the end of the day, it's another piece. It's another tool in your arsenal that you could be using, right? And you may not use it all the time either.
No, absolutely not. It's just for because we shoot at those prime time.
Yes.
At the prime time where the light's the best. Unfortunately, it's when the light's pretty much at its lowest, right? You know what I mean? At its softest, that sort of thing. Right. So, but just another tool, like you said. So,
yeah.
But I think that pretty much covers it, for a general.
I think
ISO
so. Yeah.
Talk.
Yeah. No, I agree. The exposure triangle is all summed up together. Those three pieces are the key.
Yeah, I mean, so now you have a better idea of how all three work. I think our next episode, we're going to talk about manual mode. And one thing we didn't talk about in this episode was auto ISO. Mm-hmm. And the reason we didn't was because I kind of wanted to bring it in with shooting in manual mode, because I do shoot in manual mode quite a bit using auto ISO. So that's just kind of a little teaser as to what we're going to be talking about next episode. But if you're not really, actually, we can touch on it really quickly here. Actually, if you're not too comfortable adjusting the ISO, then you can set it to auto ISO in aperture priority and let the camera decide on a good balance of shutter speed and ISO. But again, you're letting the camera take a little more control over what the image is going to look like, right?
Sure. On a bright sunny day, it's probably going to be stay at ISO 100. So,
That's right. And it's going to default to that, and it's going to give you the fastest shutter speed possible anyways, right?
Yes.
But, in auto ISO, it may, be a little too grainy for you. Shutter speed may be too slow. It just really depends. So that's why we didn't really bring it up in the episode. I just kind of wanted to make sure everybody was aware of how ISO worked with aperture priority.
Sure, but
right?
basically what you're saying is that if you're just learning and you're figuring it out, if everything is too complicated, try that to start with. Maybe would that be
That's
a good
right.
pointer for somebody just starting
Yeah,
out?
you betcha. Just start there, and then try both.
Yeah, and once you know what
that
it's
sort of
doing
thing.
more, then start playing with it. And
Yeah, when you start getting more comfortable.
yeah, for sure.
But next episode, yeah, we'll talk about auto ISO a little bit more. So
Good, sounds good.
And I just want to give a shout out to Mr. Nick there. He mentioned on YouTube we were a hoot.
He said
so
we're a hoot.
we're a hoot. So that's awesome. I'm glad to see people are enjoying our sense of humor, I guess.
I guess, if that's what you call it.
Just the fact that we're calling it as it is, and we're just having fun doing it, right? So
yeah, we gotta have fun, right? Now people can see us, right? So they can see us interacting, and
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So yeah, don't forget about our YouTube channel, guys. Also, I just wanted to bring up again, I have a workshop September 17th to the 20th with Monica Deviat in Waterton Lakes National Park. So if you want more details on that, go to my website, joedesjardins.ca, and look under the workshop tab.
Perfect. That's great. Joe, still got a couple spots left?
Yeah, got 2 spots left. So it's good to go, and we're going to be there prime time for the elk rut and
Nice.
Milky Way stuff. Yeah, you bet.
Beautiful time of year in Waterton, that's for sure.
Yeah, you betcha. And, we cover everything from landscape photography, wildlife photography, astrophotography, and we're going to throw in some portraiture there too, environmental stuff. So,
oh, wow. That's a full weekend.
Basically going to shoot till you drop.
Yeah, there you go. Hence the name, right?
Yeah, you betcha. So, yeah, I think we'll leave it with that.
Sounds
Anything
good.
else, Chris? Or
No, I don't think so. As always, if anybody has any questions or whatever, feel free to send them our way. We'd love to review them, answer them, and we'll help you out where we can.
Well, that sounds great, Chris. We'll catch everybody on the next episode.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, bye for now.
You've been listening to the Nature Photo Guys podcast. If you have any questions, contact us at info@thenaturephotoguys.ca or message us on Facebook and Instagram at the Nature Photo Guys podcast. Make sure you listen to all our new episodes on www.thenaturephotoguys.ca or visit your major podcast providers, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We'll catch you next time on the Nature Photo Guys podcast.